Hi, I'm Bryce Crittenden.
Hi, I'm Caroline Land, and welcome back to EPL's Overdue Finds.
Hey, Caroline. How's it going today?
It's going very well, Bryce, because I am very excited about today's topic.
Yeah, it's
I'm jumping right into it this week. No questions about freezies or popsicles or any other frozen treat. I'm getting right
no.
down to business.
I like it. I like it. Today's topic, of course, we are talking all about. Now, Caroline, this exact quote is in the notes that you sent me for today's episode.
Yeah.
You said the best baseball movie of all time, A League of Their Own.
According
To
to
Caroline.
Caroline, yes.
Yes.
So I will stand by that. I'm willing to entertain other points of view, but for me, this is the best baseball movie of all time.
Nice. It is not mine, but that's okay. We will get into it later. League of Their Own is definitely for me probably top 5 baseball movie. But yeah, today we're going to be talking all about A League of Their Own. It's actually, believe it or not, 30 years since the movie originally came out, and we're also lucky enough to just a couple weeks ago Amazon Prime released a League of Their Own series which you can stream. So yeah, we're going to be talking about all things A League of Their Own and some of our other favorite baseball movies on today's episode. And joining us today to chat all about A League of Their Own, and she's returning for her 6th episode, and she was actually last on our 100th episode where we chatted about the Golden Girls. Branch manager Katie Turzansky. Katie, how's it going today?
Oh, pretty good. I'm also excited for this topic, so I am ready to talk baseball movies, a worthy genre for sure.
Yeah. So we should mention, though, off the top, I know nobody can see this except myself and Katie, but Caroline, today you are wearing something a little bit different than what maybe you would normally wear into the branch. I see it looks like you have possibly a baseball jersey on, and can you tell our listeners a little bit more about that?
I sure do. I channeled my enthusiasm for today's topic into thinking about what I was going to wear. And of course, I am rocking my jersey from my time on the slow pitch team, Dewey Decimators.
Now, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, now is this this was like an EPL staff baseball team, or is this like a combination of staff and friends type thing?
Staff and partners that could be convinced to come out and fill out a roster.
And Caroline, I mean, I think it must be said, because she won't say herself, was really a star of the Dewey Decimators.
Really?
Yes, not only did
Wow.
she, absolutely kill it on the field, we also celebrated, birthdays on the diamond. We had, she was an absolute star of the Dewey Decimators.
That's true. My birthday was during the season. So, yeah, no, I cannot t- I do not think I have the words to tell you how poor of a player I am. You have not seen anyone throw a ball worse than me. I guarantee that. I do not understand how I am so bad at throwing a ball. But with the decimators, we like to say that we were first in fun,
First
and
and
it was
fun.
a blast.
So, Caroline, what position did you play?
Bench when I could. And no, I would fight. Like we were supposed to rotate through and, make sure everyone got a chance to play, and I would be like, "Oh no, I'm sure, like you go ahead. You take the field. I'll just sit over here." And that was when I was my happiest. But if not that, then usually catcher. But not actually catching and not able to throw it back to the
Yeah, slow
pitcher.
pitch is different because the mat catches the ball, so you're not having
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
catch anything.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
picking
But
up
still, like
and
catcher's
throwing.
I was ready though when there were those high ding fouls that would go up. I would make a play like that once every 2 or 3 games. I usually got like one good hit of the season. So Yeah, it was so much fun, and it really was a great time. But amazingly, I was not scouted on for future slow pitch.
There wasn't the Rockford Peaches weren't scouting you for maybe a revival of the All American Girls Professional Baseball League.
No, and I think that like when we talked about our soundtrack episode, I had mentioned that this was a favorite of mine, and I used to play it and dance around my living room listening to the soundtrack, which is amazing to this movie. But I think maybe when I played Slow Pitch, you could tell that I had spent most of my childhood dancing around the living room to music rather than actually learning how to play sports. But Katie, you were also on the team,
I was.
and you can actually play.
I can actually throw a ball. So
Yeah, she can. She can. It's quite
Katie,
impressive to me.
Katie, what position did you play?
I was usually going between third or shortstop. So I was over there on the
Okay,
baseline, and
that's a tough position to play.
I grew up playing ball. So I played a lot of softball, but like fastball, not slow pitch, as a kid, which is partly why I loved the baseball movies all through the 90s. Um, and then I took many years off and had to sort of shake it out and try to remember how to play. But yeah, I have a bit of a history with the sport. Nothing glamorous or exciting, but we made it to city finals a few times in my youth, so I have medals to show for it.
Nice. Well, I'm so excited that you're here today joining us, and this is obviously your great, perfect guest to have for today's topic. But before we get into our overdue finds, I just want to remind listeners that tickets are now available for our next Forward Thinking Speaker Series event. An Evening with Monica Lewinsky, presented by the Edmonton Community Foundation, takes place on September 27th at the Northern Alberta Jubilee Auditorium. During this special presentation, you'll learn about her battle against online harassment and how she's advocating for a safer social media environment. Here's the best part. Tickets start at just $10 each, with all proceeds supporting EPL's Ready, Set, Read program. Visit ticketmaster.ca to grab your tickets before they're gone. Caroline, are you heading off to the Monica Lewinsky event as well?
We've been waiting for this for so long. She was
Yeah.
originally scheduled to come, I think, in 2020, right?
Yeah, it's funny because we had booked her in 2019, obviously for 2020. And I remember just before we kind of closed up shop for the pandemic, I kind of signed off on our marketing materials, our poster, everything for it. And then it was like everything hit the fan, and then yeah, we were delaying stuff, so we're so happy here anyway on the events team that I work on here at EPL that we can finally bring Monica to Edmonton, and yeah, this is gonna be a great event, and like I said, tickets are only $10 each, so this is gonna be a good one. All right, so overdue finds picks time. Katie, what have you been enjoying lately?
Well, I was rocking out this weekend. I went to a concert, and I was trying to think if it's my first indoor concert since the pandemic, and it might be. I can't say that for sure. It all kind of blurs together. But I was excited to go to a concert this weekend. And I want to mention the two of the groups that I saw at this concert because we have albums for both of them in the collection. The first was The Pretty Reckless, which is a heavy rock group, and it is fronted by the woman who played Cindy Lou Who in the Jim Carrey Grinch 22 years ago. And she is
Oh,
now like a rocker.
she was also on Gossip Girl.
Yes, she was. I was looking, literally sitting there looking her up
Yeah,
to be like, oh.
Taylor Momsen.
And she was fantastic, and they rocked. And we have both CDs and streaming albums available at EPL for The Pretty Reckless. And then the headliner of the show was Greta Von Fleet, which, if you don't know, they're a current rock band with a very vintage sound. They're very Zeppelin inspired. And man, it was showy. Like they had fire, they had fireworks, they had like, 20-minute drum solo odysseys, like truly channeling that that performance aspect of rock, which you may not get from the CDs in our collection, but it makes me want to tell everybody about them. So, the Pretty Reckless and Greta Von Fleet albums are both available both in disc and streaming through Hoopla from EPL.
I am a huge Greta Van Fleet fan. I did not, unfortunately, get a chance to go to their concert, but I know it's their music. I think it was a couple years ago on our Best of the Year episode. I had recommended their CD, and yeah, same thing. Like, they remind me a lot of, they just kind of have that old classic rock sound, and like you said, comparing it to Led Zeppelin. I know you can't really compare anybody to Led Zeppelin, but I mean, when you listen to them, you can definitely hear shades of them anyway. And yeah, that's all. So I assume then you loved the concert.
Yep, it was awesome, and it was like it's still kind of fun to be going back to concerts. Like it isn't my first concert since the pandemic, but it really felt like it was maybe my first one at Rogers since the pandemic. And so being in that big crowd and just being there with people that were so excited to be there, and that's infectious, right? And so yeah, it was fantastic. And I honestly, between the two groups, couldn't tell you which I preferred. Like they were both so good. I mean, Greta is so, like I say, like showy and flashy, and that is interesting for a whole other reason. And the Pretty Reckless is more just like straight rock concert. Like they didn't have a whole big light show going on, but they were both so excellent. And I've been listening to them here in my office in the library, just continuing the rock out for a couple of extra days. So big recommend.
Caroline, how about you? Have you attended any rock shows lately?
Have not attended any rock shows. I have a book pick this week for one that came out earlier this year and might end up on my best of list. I know we're talking a lot about that already, but the book is called One's Company by Ashley Hudson, and it was released in June of this year. The main character, Bonnie, has had a really hard life. So when she wins an unfathomable amount of money in the lottery, like it's so big they don't even say how big it is. It's that unfathomable. She decides she's going to take this money and recreate the set of her favorite TV show, which is Three's Company. Now, I
Love it.
love this description because it sounds like it sounds like you're in for one type of book. And that is not the type of book that this is. As we read, we learn that Bonnie has a lot of unresolved trauma in her life. Three's Company was what she used to escape the darkness of her own existence and all of the things that had happened to her, which she has not really processed or dealt with. And the way that she goes about creating this imaginary world that has to be perfect down to the details. Like she is sourcing newspapers from that area of California from the late 70s and early 80s so that the set can be that authentic. And then like it is just this really interesting look at kind of how people cope and deal, and the imagination that takes over. um it I, I'm not saying that I could see myself creating a full-on replica of a TV show or movie set or something like that, but I also don't see myself not doing that. So this was kind of like an interesting cautionary tale slash literary fiction for me to read. So that was One's Company by Ashley Hudson.
Sounds really good, and yeah, you definitely have me intrigued because it sounded the way you started it like a kind of a very funny, light read. This woman's quest to recreate the set of Three's Company, which I respect, and right away it's like,
And not only the apartment set, but also like set up like anything, the Roper's apartment, the flower shop where Janet worked, the Regal Beagle,
oh man,
like just everything. And then, her goal, her vision is that she would kind of become the character and go about your day as if you were on Three's Company. So, yeah.
That sounds amazing. I'm gonna have to put a hold on that one. Is it it's a newer release then? You said it would could.
Yeah, it was a newer release, came out in June, and it's not very long of a book. I think, just around like the 250 pages mark. So, yeah, I believe it's Ashley Hudson's first novel, and definitely an author I'll be checking out again in the future.
Sounds good. It's a short read. You've got me hooked anyway.
I had you at Three's Company.
You did. You really did. That's all you really had to say.
Yeah.
Three's Company set, and I'm like, done,
Yeah.
sold.
What have you been enjoying recently?
I also have a book recommendation this week as well, and mine's also a fairly new release, and yeah, it just came out. It might have been July, maybe. So anyway, there's nothing. It's funny, Katie. You mentioned about going to a rock concert. One of the things I miss going to, and I haven't gone to yet since the pandemic's been over, is seeing like a stand-up comedy show. And I love going to see stand-up comedians perform. And one of my favorite comedians right now is Tom Segura. And I was so excited to see that he actually has a book out called "I'd Like to Play Alone, Please," which is my pick this week. So. This book isn't like a traditional biography, and it's more of kind of like a collection of essays and short stories, much like Yearbook by Seth Rogen, which was my favorite book that came out in 2021. So this one is very familiar, very similar to that. So like that book, I actually recommend borrowing the audiobook version, which is read by Tom Segura himself. He shares some funny stories about parenting, spending summers in Peru while he was a teenager, stand-up comedy, and how his some of my favorite stories were about how his veteran father loved to share gory stories about fighting in the Vietnam War during the most inappropriate times. So this is a book that's going to make you laugh, and what I enjoy about this one, especially commuting into the office or just around town, is I can listen to this in my vehicle, and it definitely makes my commute a lot more entertaining and enjoyable. So yeah, so the book's called "I'd Like to Play Alone, Please." This is also very similar to One's Company. This is a really short read as well. It's like I said, I'm listening to the audiobook, but like I think the actual book itself is probably around maybe just over 200 to 250 pages. So this is a good one. Definitely recommend. All right. So today's topic, of course, we're talking about A League of Their Own. It's the 30th anniversary of the release of the original movie. And of course, we have the TV series now on Prime. Caroline, like a lot of these kind of looking back episodes, you actually have some fun facts maybe about A League of Their Own that you want to share with our listeners?
Yes, I do, and I am ready. So I'm gonna go. I don't know. I had a better segue in mind, but I'm just gonna go in this. So as you mentioned, it was released in July of 1992. So celebrating 30 years this year. It's the story of the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League during World War II. The team suspended play while men went to either join the war effort or actually fight overseas. Some of the owners decided to try having a league with girls in it in order
Scandalous.
to make some money while the men's league was suspended. So the movie tells the story of Dottie Hinson, who's the catcher from Oregon. She and her younger sister Kit, who's a pitcher, end up as Rockford Peaches on one of the four teams in the league. But there is an intense sibling rivalry that's actually kind of one-sided, but creates some interesting dynamics for them and their teammates. Also, the league isn't making a lot of money, so it's up to the players to make to draw as much attention as possible to the league so that it's a success and they can stay and continue playing ball, because for many of the players, it's the only place where they've ever felt at home. Directed by Penny Marshall, who had seen a documentary about the real life League several years earlier and decided she contacted the directors of the documentary and said, "Hey, I want to do something with this." The movie starred Gina Davis, Tom Hanks, Laurie Petty, Madonna, and Rosie O'Donnell. The broader cast included Tracy Reiner, who is Penny Marshall's daughter, Biddy Schramm, John Lovitz, Taya Leone, and Janet Jones, also known as Wayne Gretzky's wife. She plays the pitcher on a different team. It also had Penny Marshall's Laverne and Shirley co-stars, Eddie Mecca, who played Madonna's dance partner in a fun scene, and David Lander as an announcer, particularly during the World Series scenes. The movie was seventh at the US box office for the calendar year of 1992. So in that January to December period, it was number 7 behind. Are you ready for these movies?
Hmm.
Batman Returns, Lethal Weapon 3, Sister Act, Home Alone 2, Wayne's World, and Basic Instinct.
Wow.
I just love this list. And because of like I used the list used the calendar year, there were November releases that didn't chart as high, but this was also the year for Aladdin and The Bodyguard. So if you look at like the worldwide box office or total gross, then you'll see those on there as well. The Amazon Prime series, not the first time that this show is adapted for television. In April of 1993, a spin off TV series started airing on CBS. It lasted for 3 whole weeks. And although 6 episodes were produced, including some that went unaired, unlike the Amazon Prime series, it was a direct, like, continuation of the movie that featured the same characters, but only a few of the same actors. Mainly Megan Cavanagh, who plays Marla, was the biggest kind of name that crossed over. Plots for the series included things like the team enters a dance marathon, or the team gets a chimpanzee as a mascot. So
Oh
it's
my
hard to say why this show didn't catch
This
on.
feels like a throwback to our Golden Girls episode.
Yeah, it definitely, and like I watched a little bit of the 93 series on YouTube, and it's like a stage play, and a lot of like the 3 camera sitcoms are, but and it's throwing back to the World War II era. So there's like and it was 30 years ago. So there's a lot of factors in play here, but it was unusual. I will say that.
Was it a comedy? Like, what was there, like a studio audience and everything?
I believe there was a laugh track. I don't
Okay.
know about a studio audience, but like was there a comedy? I'm picturing the team gets a chimpanzee as a mascot, but played like drama. So more research may be needed on that. In 2012, the movie was selected for preservation in the U.S. National Film Registry, and one of its most famous lines, "There's no crying in baseball," has been recognized by the American Film Institute as one of the most memorable film lines of all time. So there's some facts about the movie we will be talking about today.
So, Katie, why do you think the original movie was such a success?
Because it's great. It just is so good. Well, but really, I mean, I was thinking about this because we love sports movies, we love baseball movies, but often women in sports movies are not. They're not the whole team. They're either supportive partners or another common trope is like there's one of them that's playing on a boys' team, like the figure skater and the Mighty Ducks and stuff like that. This was like such a great opportunity to tell this story, and have it be a little bit different in that huge genre of sports films. it is a little bit of a different perspective. I watched it a fair amount growing up, and I always thought it felt so feminist. And rewatching it as an adult, the whole league was based on them being sex objects. So, the league wasn't feminist, but I still think that the story that's being told in the film and the individual stories of the women and how they're, finding independence at a time where that was difficult for women to do, and in a way that women never had before by being professional athletes. I think that's a story that people still really relate to and really, want to see them succeed and want to see these women claim some of that power for themselves. And so I think that's part of it. I also think the period. I think that there's something about kind of the contrast between a candy bar sponsored sports team in the context of a world war, that is really compelling. And then on top of that, the contrast between what they're telling these women, and they go to basically like a finishing school where they have to look a certain way, they have to present a certain kind of femininity, and the aesthetic for women in the 40s was pretty strongly defined, and they looked a certain way, and their hair had to be set, and their lipstick had to be a certain color. And so that contrast too between them trying to balance that, while sliding into home and getting totally covered in shale and dirt and everything else. I think some of those contrasts really set it up as being such a compelling film as well.
One of my
Mhm.
favorite parts of the film is the newsreel piece that does exactly what you are talking about right now, where it introduces the characters and shows how they are great baseball players. But then, don't worry,
Yeah.
they might be good baseball players, but Betty loves, you know, knitting in the dugout, and she's such a homemaker. Co um her teammates call her Betty Spaghetti. So like like an actual kind of, I mean, it's fake. It's in the movie, but it's like a real way that you never forget that the players are women.
Yeah.
Because the league wouldn't let anyone forget that.
I agree. The newsreel parts are like some of my favorite parts of the whole movie, and it's funny because I was watching it and I'm just like, the announcer. I'm like, where do I know that voice from? I'm like, this kind of sounds like Seymour Skinner from The Simpsons. And sure enough, the narrator on the newsreels is Harry Shearer, who does the voice of like Principal Skinner and Mr. Burns from The Simpsons. But yeah, I love that kind of like old timey newsreel type voice and footage. And yeah, I also, I was kind of looking back at the movie, watching it again. I'd seen it, countless times before, but thinking about why this movie was such a hit. And Katie, you kind of said it perfectly. It's because it was a good movie. And I'm sure word of mouth really helped. And I also think too, it's a story that probably most people didn't maybe know about. Like, this movie takes place in the early 1940s, and the movie came out in 92. So, I mean, we're talking about like 50 years between when this actually happened and when the public is kind of a little bit more so learning about it. And I know there was the PBS documentary as well, but yeah, I think enough time probably passed from when it actually happened where people are like, I want to learn more about this, or I want to, hear a little bit more about this women's professional baseball league. Like, I didn't know that was an actual thing. So, yeah, and the marketing too for the movie was really fun. And I went back and looked at some trailers for it, and kind of the players showing up on baseball cards and the balls being hit and everything. And just the movie itself, it just has a great, just an amazing look. I love that whole kind of we're coming to the end of World War II, early 1940s America, and like all the just even little touches to like the signage around the baseball stadium. Like, it's a fun movie, and it's just great to watch.
The New York Times review had a line that said it's a serious film that's lighter than air.
Yeah.
And that summed it up for me. It's fun. And I like there are two scenes in the movie that really get me each time. Both of them have to do with Betty Spaghetti, but like one of them is when Tom Hanks rips up her husband has a copy of the Tom Hanks character's rookie card, and she wants to get it signed for her, and like she's just said, if anything happens, my husband's gonna kill me. Tom Hanks's character comes in. He is like drunk, he's not paying attention, he's this, he rips up the card. It is like the biggest like oh moment until there's a later one. But that is that's the movie. It's serious but lighter than air. All he ripping up a baseball card is not in the scheme in a like a World War II movie is not that bad, but the way that it's portrayed is just gutting in that scene.
Yes, and then that sets up the arc. I think that moment is so important too because of he had like what his relationship with Betty Spaghetti is later when like she gets some bad news. And so like you see sort of the journey that they've gone through that he's gone through as he's matured as a coach and like settled into that job, but also that like the relationships of that team and how when it starts like he doesn't care about anyone and they barely care about each other, and like how that changes over time. Like that baseball card moment needs to happen to help kind of set the baseline for where that relationship is.
And multiple characters are allowed to have arcs even in the movie, and I think that that's maybe more easily done on a TV series that follows different characters and different perspectives. But even though it's clearly Dottie Hinson, Gina Davis is our main character, and her relationship with her sister is kind of driving a lot of the film. Other characters have arcs, have like growth that happens that is independent of that storyline, and it is so rare for characters to kind of be their own people interacting and having relationships with people, but I mean they're not just there in service of a single plot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think of the character of Marla Hooch, which is fantastic. And I mean, that character in herself, she could have been the movie. Like, we could have just followed her character and just had little blips of everybody else, and it would have still been really entertaining. But yeah, you're right. It is interesting in that this is, and we'll talk about the TV series in a little bit here, but a story like this, it's perfect for TV because there is so many different characters. But credit to Penny Marshall and the team of writers for the script, because yeah, we do. The movie isn't long. Like, it doesn't feel over long anyway, and yet we do kind of learn about each of the characters.
The movie's not long, but it feels like it ends 3 times. It has
Yes.
a number of endings.
I could do without the contemporary framing. Like the movie begins and ends in the 90s, and I would be happy with the movie set entirely in the 40s. Like, I always am like, oh right, I forgot about this part, because in my heart it's them in the 40s, and I'm not sure I need that. I get why they do it, but I'm not sure I need that.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's not my favorite part of the movie, but yeah, it's understandable why they went there. One other thing too I got to touch on, we talk about why this movie was a hit. Another big reason too, we can't forget the Madonna factor in all of this. So on our movie soundtracks episode, we talked about like here in this time in the 90s, Caroline, you mentioned, some of the top movies, and, you mentioned like Wayne's World had like Bohemian Rhapsody kind of re-released for that. But like each of these movies seem to have like these big like music videos and songs for the soundtrack that kind of directly tied in. And we would see footage of the movie and these music videos, which were absolutely huge at the time. So of course, like Madonna singing This Used to Be My Playground, like that song was absolutely huge at the time, which by the way, like when I was listening to it again, like they're playing it over the end credits of this movie, such a depressing song.
It's the worst. And
I wish they would have went with something else.
I would stop the movie. I only recently, by recently I mean like this last weekend, saw all the way to the very end of the movie because when it was over, they do the fade out with the photo and then I would just say, "Okay, the end," and stop it because it's so darn sad. I don't need that in my life.
Just watching it, I'm just like, oh man, I like. And then like I went online and was looking at like the lyrics and everything, and I'm just like, I get it, but it's just, I don't know. The song doesn't
It
fit
doesn't fit.
the
It doesn't fit.
the tone of, especially the end credits where these, these former these women professional ball players, and it's cool to see them play, but it's just, it's just such a downer.
And I have to say that the soundtrack, which I loved and danced around to all the time, it didn't actually have the song on it because it was released through whatever, and
Yeah.
Madonna was signed to whoever else. Like it was definitely out there in the world and part of the movie, not on the soundtrack compact disc, which I had. So I was free to sing and dance around without encountering that overwhelming sadness.
Well, it's funny, Caroline, because when you mentioned you're dancing around to this soundtrack, I thought of like, oh, like I look kind of sad dancing around to this. Used to be my playground by yourself, all slow, and maybe you'd have a ribbon or something like that. But yeah, it's. I'm glad to hear that the soundtrack is
Yeah,
40s kind of like Grandpa Simpson big band music.
yeah. Katie, I cut you off to talk about my dancing. What were you gonna say?
When we were talking about the credits, I was just gonna say how much I actually enjoy that part where you see some of the women playing in their, I don't know what they're like, their 70s, their
70s
yeah,
probably. Yeah.
and like I first of all, it's just so neat that they get that moment in the film, but also, um, in their 70s, they're playing better baseball than most of the actors are playing, and they do a good job in the movie of like you see the plays and everything, but like when they get in close on like one of these actors throwing a ball or whatever, you're like, there's no way that would have made it across the diamond. And so to see some of these women, like, God, they could play. And they still could play in the 90s, which I just think is so cool.
Oh yeah, like when I was watching it, no, I played softball too and played some baseball growing up, and I never considered myself a good player at all. But watching that, and I was just thinking to myself, oh man, these ladies would school
Oh,
me on
totally.
the field.
Yeah.
Like they would just be, yeah, I'd
Yeah.
be missing hits, and they'd just be whizzing balls by me. It would be, they look great.
Yeah.
The writing of the movie too, I think part of it is that there were so many great characters and the writers knew and could write to it. There were probably ad libs on filming as well, but this is honestly, I think this might be tied with Home Alone for the movie I quote the most. And I have to restrain myself from just starting like quoting the movie right now when we're talking about it, of just like going in and just bang 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 going through all of like the quotes that I use all the
Yeah.
time. And sometimes they're not even like relevant, but they're just so funny I say them anyway. And like the lines in this movie, I think the writing, in addition to like the story and the arcs and the characterization, the writing, the way that the characters talk, is it contributes to the fun of the movie for sure. So looking at the people we had, or we, I say it like I'm in the movie, the people who were saying the lines, beyond the big name stars like Gina Davis, who had already won an Oscar at this point, Tom Hanks, who would go on to win an Oscar very soon, and Madonna, Rosie O'Donnell, who is maybe became more famous than she was at the time. There are a bunch of great actors playing smaller roles in the movie. Which of these actors stands out to you? Katie, I'll start with you.
You and I have talked about John Lovitz's role. I don't want to step on your toes if you want us to talk about John Lovitz,
No,
but
go ahead.
he, in the beginning, he plays the league scout, a league scout, Ernie Capadino. And so he's on the screen for like 7 minutes, less probably. He has just a couple of scenes where he's trying to get Dottie, really, the Gina Davis sister, to join the team, and she won't go without her kid sister Kit, and gets them on the train and takes them to tryouts. And he's just so funny. Like every line, it's just so concentrated. Every line he has is solid gold. And whether he's like walking through the the barnyard and like trying to get around the animals, whether he's on the train, whether he's talking baseball or chickens or anything else, it is so funny and so good. And I kind of forgot, like, I'm like, oh yeah, okay, John Lovitz, and we're watching it. And then like I forget that he drops them off at tryouts and then disappears. Like he's not in the rest of the movie. He just is the vehicle that like gets them to the league. And um and that also makes it so wonderful. Like he just is this like flash in the pan in the movie and then he's gone. And it's so good.
Yeah, we see him too kind of at the end when they're in the Hall of Fame. We
Yeah.
assume it's him because they've got like the cigar and
Yeah.
he turns around
Yeah.
and but yeah, it's not John Lovett still, but yeah, he's absolutely my favorite side character too. And it's funny because I remember like if you'd asked me before kind of rewatching it this past weekend, like what some of my favorite scenes from the movie where I probably would have said most of the stuff with John Lovitz, but one of the lines that I was absolutely dying while watching it was when they get on the train and he's sitting next to like that salesperson and he's talking about how much he sold or he hit his targets or whatever, and John Lovitz in his John Lovitz voice is like, if I had your job, I'd kill myself. Wait here, I'll see if I can dig up a pistol. Like just his delivery of that line and just everything John Lovitz does. I think he's such an underrated comedic actor, and I wish we had him in more stuff. So yeah, to me he steals the show in this one.
No, Katie, did you have another character or more to say on John Lovitz?
I think you already mentioned Megan Kavanaugh as Marla Hooch. And I mean, she's so great. And is it a little problematic that her whole, like, all the laughs for that character come from her being perceived as unattractive? Like, yeah, that's not great. But what I wanted to talk about was the scene between Marla, and her father as she's leaving. And her father, who's played by Eddie Jones, who is really honest about saying, like, listen, I raised her mother was gone, and like I didn't know how to raise her to be feminine and beautiful and all of those things, but I raised her to play ball, and really trying to get her a shot and kind of recognizing how the part he played and kind of how she grew up in a way that's probably more aware than maybe that character in that time period might have been. But then she doesn't want to leave him, and the way, and it breaks his heart too to say goodbye to her. You can tell that the two of them, they're each other's world. But the way that he encourages her to go out and like make a life for herself and not worry about him because she can go and do something amazing here. I That scene is just, it gets me every time. And I think, Marla is played for laughs because of her looks, which aren't even, she is a perfectly lovely looking person, but they have her playing up certain things. But that moment is so heartwarming and so lovely. And I think it gets kind of bypassed in the rest of the Marla Hooch character. But I think both of them do such a great job.
I am about 5 seconds away from bursting into tears just thinking of that scene. So I'm going to pivot to the beautiful moment of Marla standing in the outfield during a newsreel. And again, it's more of this storyline that Marla is too hideous to look at. And so they are filming her at a distance and she's waving and they say, "Wow, what a hitter." And it's very funny. Marla's a great character.
Marla is a great character, and like I love that her story too. The person who was like too hideous to look at, we can't have a close up. She's going to stay in the outfield. We're going to talk about how everyone else is feminine and delicate and lovely, and Marla, what a hitter. She's the one who has a romance. Like she's the one who has a romantic story. And I think that's just, I'm glad. I'm happy for her. And I'm happy for
Her
her dad because he was right and she went off and did great things.
I like the balance of the characters who have that level of support and the characters who don't, because it would not be realistic, I think, to have everyone in the movie have a parent like Marla's dad,
Yeah.
or uh Rosie O'Donnell's character's dad. He comes to the last game of the World Series. He's talking about how proud he is of her, and he's going to take her out for a steak dinner, and it's just wonderful and sweet. But then you have Dottie and Kit's parents, who I'm sure are proud of Dottie, but with Kit, it's like, Kit, don't talk so loud. We're trying to hear the radio. We're trying to do this. The women in different scenes talk about the lack of support they've had from parents, from partners. Evelyn's story, she has to bring her kid on the road because her out of work at home husband refuses to do anything to make her life easier so she can not only fulfill her dream of playing in this, or I assume it's a dream. That's actually an interesting point around like how much of this is a dream for these women, and how much of this is just something that she'll be able to do to take care of her family if her husband's out of work and not earning anything. That they don't all have that support, so they find it from each other. But there are these lovely glimpses of the people who get it, and maybe they don't have all of the abilities to give the character, to give Marla, to give Dolores everything that they have, but they want what's best for them, for sure. I love the character Helen Haley, played by Anne Ramsey, who later on would go on to be on Mad About You. She played Helen Hunt's sister on Mad About You. She's kind of not uptight, but proper. And so she's not always necessarily getting along well with everyone. She has some very good lines. She's an accomplished coffee maker, which we see in the newsreel. We find out in the epilogue wraparound that she went on to become a doctor. Just great. And she has the wonderful line of, "Has anyone seen my new red hat?" After there's been a knockdown, drag-out fight between Dottie and Kit in their shared house, she comes in with this line, totally oblivious to it. And I just have a fondness for Helen Haley.
Oh, and like also that scene too, where I don't remember the character's name, but at the beginning we find out that after they do the tryouts, and this poor lady is trying to like find her name, but she can't read. Yes, and then is it Helen who comes over and is like kind of helps her find her name and everything? And yeah, definitely one of the most heartwarming scenes in the movie.
Yeah. I think we should also give credit, because she isn't credited in the credits, to Delisa Chin Tyler, who is the black woman who fires off that absolute rocket when she throws the ball back at the Peaches when it kind of goes astray. I think we'll talk about this when we talk about the TV show. The movie doesn't go into the issue of race, really, in the 40s in America. Other than in that moment, and she has no lines, and they just sort of have this moment of kind of seeing each other and acknowledging that they have this talent and that there's a strength there, and that's it. But it is a good moment, and I think we should name her because she wasn't even named in the credits of the movie.
So speaking of the TV show, have you both had a chance to watch it? And Katie, what are your thoughts? Have you watched the whole series?
I've watched the whole series. I watched the last episode last night. I really liked it. We've talked about how it's a relatively short movie. It is a light movie. Even though there are serious topics, even though we're talking about like a world war, it is not like a heavy war movie, because they told the story that they were going to tell, but there is so much more room, even in a short 8-episode series, to dig into some of the other issues that are kind of ignored by the movie, and I think they do a really good job of it. And so issues about like LGBTQ content, which isn't really there in the movie at all. And then, as I said, racial content, and looking at the tensions, and there's a similar moment where in the show where a black woman she basically sneaks herself into tryouts. She throws an incredible ball from way in the outfield, and everyone is really impressed. And it's very like that moment in the movie, and then she's kicked out. But the show doesn't abandon her, and even though she's not a peach, we continue to follow her story. And so just the depth that's there to tell some of those stories for people that are just kind of ignored by the movie, and then also dig into the stories of the people on the beaches as well, and give a little bit more depth to the characters. I think it's great. It also it harkens back to the movie a lot. So there's repeated lines. There are moments that you're like, oh, I see what they did there, and they've reworked this moment from the movie, and but it's also its own thing, and I thought it was really fun, but also like a little heavier hitting in a way that it deserves to be, I think.
Caroline, have you had a chance to watch it yet?
No, I haven't. And when it was announced, I was, I think, cautiously excited about it. But I know that the team behind it were appreciated, like they appreciated what the original movie was and wanted to make something that really kind of honored that. And I I am really looking forward, even more now that I'm hearing a bit more about what the series is and how people have experienced it. So definitely on my list to check out.
Yeah, I've only been able to watch, I actually just watched the first episode last night, and it's a show I'm going to keep watching. I really, really adored kind of the pilot episode, and it's interesting, Katie, you brought up, some of the topics that they do cover just in the first episode alone about race and sexuality and everything. And obviously stuff that, they didn't really get into in the 1992 movie. But yeah, I'm really curious to see kind of where they go with it, and some of the performances as well. I'm a big fan of Abby Jacobson, who plays kind of the lead character, and she's from Broad City, and she's also very funny in this past season or actually a couple years ago now, in Curb Your Enthusiasm too. She's really good in pretty much anything I've seen her in. She's always really funny. And also Darcy Carden, who kind of almost plays, it's almost like maybe the Madonna type role from the movie.
Kind of, but less so as it goes on. But that's how I described her too. That sort of super feminine and super flirty and sexy player that, has her hair just right and has her lipstick just right, and everything is, she's, that has no problem getting through the like how to be a woman class that they take. But that character gets a lot more depth as it goes, and she does a fantastic job.
Yeah. A lot of people probably know her from she's on Barry, and then also The Good Place. Yeah, most people probably recognize her from The Good Place. So, yeah, I'm going to continue watching it, and I'm glad to see that, Katie, you enjoyed it. So
I did. I enjoyed it. I thought, like I said, it was sort of a fair tribute to the movie, but also handled quite a few things better than the movie did, in that it handled them at all. And so, like it was telling that story, but also so much more. And so I really enjoyed it. I was kind of looking. I was like, are there going to be cameos from the movie? And Rosie O'Donnell does appear, and it was great. Like, it's just this great little cameo. And I didn't notice any others. I was kind of looking. I might have missed some other cameos from the movie, but definitely lots of references and stuff. If you're a fan of the movie, you'll pick that stuff up through the show for sure.
While A League of Their Own is my favorite baseball movie, I am willing to admit that there have been a lot of other great ones. What other baseball related titles have you enjoyed? Katie, I know you've got a few.
I do, but I want to hear. Bryce he already hinted that he has strong favorite in this area, so I want to hear what his favorite is.
I've got a couple, actually. My all-time favorite baseball movie, though, I think I've mentioned this on the show before, is The Sandlot. So this is a 1993 family movie. You're Killing Me smells. A lot of people love that. So this movie just the movie itself takes place in the 50s, but it just reminded me a lot of playing baseball with my own friends while growing up, like over the summer, just not necessarily in an organized league, but just, looking to see who's around, going out to a park and just, hitting the ball around and kind of having like little mini games. And the movie's hilarious with, the kids trying to retrieve this Babe Ruth signed ball from this very scary dog. And it reminds me also a little bit too. It's also kind of like a much lighter version of Stand By Me, and just like, these boys coming together. And it's just a really fun movie. So that's a movie where if I see it's on TV, I'll stop whatever I'm doing and watch it.
I think for The Sandlot that there's a certain group of mostly men who watched it as a boy, who, like, when I was saying, oh, I was talking to my husband, I'm like, I'm thinking about baseball movies, and he's like, okay, but all of these movies are here and The Sandlot is way up here. Like, it just exists in a totally different space for the person who watched it at the exact right age with the exact right experience. The Sandlot is like next level for some people, for sure. Anyway, I interrupted you, sorry.
Yeah, no, it's a fantastic movie, and it's one that I would recommend to anybody, even if you're not a baseball fan. I think anybody will, enjoy the story. On the opposite end of the spectrum, kind of more on the drama side, I would go with 2011's Moneyball, starring Brad Pitt, starring as the real life general manager of the Oakland A's, Billy Beane. And so this is a movie that I remember hearing about originally, where I was like, this isn't going to work as a movie, because I'd read the book, and the book is just essentially about like baseball analysis and how, the A's, trying to compete in the same division with the likes of the Boston Red Sox and the New York Yankees and these big teams that can spend a ton of money. They had to get creative with how they brought in players and how they scouted and everything. And they took this idea of baseball scouting, which had been done for, over 100 years, and just kind of turning it on its head and, looking for different ways to, have an advantage over these big spending teams. And, the movie, as a baseball stats geek like me who loves paying attention to that stuff, like, this movie is, it's one of my favorites too.
I love that movie too. And you're right. It's so much better than it has any right to be as a stats movie.
Yeah.
But it is so good.
Yeah, like, I mean, if you look at the book, it's funny because if you're a fan of the movie and you go pick up the book and be like, oh, I want to read this, you're going to hate it. Like, it's just, they're two totally different things, but, definitely the movie's kind of more for like a general audiences. But yeah, it had no right to work, but it did.
Yeah.
Katie, I have 4 words for you. Rookie of the Year.
Oh my God, it's so good. Disney made a bunch of like family baseball sports movies in general through the 90s. And I do love several of the baseball ones actually star Thomas Ian Nicholas, the same kid. And I really, Rookie of the Year is one that I have always loved. I recently rewatched it, and honestly, it stood up for me. I still really like it. And so Rookie of the Year is about a kid played by Thomas Ian Nicholas who breaks his arm. And when his cast comes off, his shoulder is like spring loaded. So something happens in the healing process, and all of a sudden he's just like able to fire pitches like no one has ever fired pitches before. And hilariously, he makes it to the majors. They bring him in to pitch. For kids that played ball, this was like the dream. And of course, all the funny stuff about how, what is it like to be the one kid who's like, I think he's supposed to be 11 or something, in the dressing room with all of these grown up real life baseball players, and what's it like to be on the road with them. It has Howard Stern is in it, who just with his like great physical comedy and all of that normal stuff that he does. And Gary Busey plays like the washed up pitcher that's kind of mentoring him, which I find kind of odd. And he's like way too old to still be in the majors, but there he is. And then my favorite part too, John Candy is in it as the exasperated play-by-play guy. And so he's up in the booth and just finding the whole thing ridiculous, but can't help but be excited about this team, which is bottom of the division, but of course going all the way with this kid on the mound. And so that is one that I have always really liked, and is in our collection, which I was impressed by because it's also a 30-year-old film. But it is a fun one for sure.
Katie, I have to interrupt you though. Quick, pretty big correction though. You mentioned Howard Stern was in the movie.
Did I say Howard?
It is actually Daniel
Stern. I said the wrong Stern. I just wrote in my notes, I just had Stern, and I just put the wrong name. No, you're right. That's my bad.
It's funny.
Yeah,
you mentioned it, and I was just like, I've seen that movie a lot. Like, I don't recall how. And when you said like the physical comedy part, I'm like, Daniel Stern.
That'll teach me to just make quick notes and not write it all out.
That'll learn you.
That'll learn me. Oh well. Anyway, Daniel Stern is hilarious. There's one point where they're on the road and there's a connecting door between two hotel rooms, and there's like a door in each hotel room and like a tiny gap in between, and he gets himself locked in between and misses out on like a whole practice or a whole game or something. And it's like so absurd, but it's also like, of course, this is what Daniel Stern would be doing. He would be locked in a 6-inch space between two hotel room doors.
Great movie. That was an overdue fine pick of mine probably a few months ago, actually. It's a good one.
But there's so many, like, so from that same range, there's Angels in the Outfield, of course, with Christopher Lloyd as a literal angel helping the California Angels by way of 2 kids in the foster system, which is very heartwarming and like a little bit sad, but really lovely at the same time. Another one that's sort of baseball, but I really liked as a kid, was A Kid in King Arthur's Court, which is, what's his name again? Thomas Ian Nicholas, playing for a baseball team called the Knights. But then he goes back in time and he is in King Arthur's Court, and it's less about baseball at that point, but it's fun too. I always have loved Field of Dreams. Like, let's wrap baseball up with a ghost story. I'm there for that. I think that's great. But there's so many, and like that period, there was Little Big League, there was Major League, there was Mr. Baseball. There were so many that came out at that time. I mean, we've always loved sports movies. People love an underdog story, but oh my God, the baseball movies at that time, it was huge.
Yeah, it seemed like there was at least 2 coming out every year. For the Love of the Game with Kevin Costner came out in the late 90s, which is also another pretty good one too. So yeah. Caroline, besides A League of Their Own, do you have any other favorite baseball movies, or is that just like that's your Sandlot, like nothing's touching it?
I mean, yes, but I think like I honestly couldn't think of one that I have enjoyed the same way. The one title that came to mind for me was something that I've watched fairly recently and appreciate more and more every time I see it, and that's the 3rd season episode of The Simpsons, Homer at the Bat. There's a baseball team at the power plant. They're on their way to the finals. Mr. Burns gets involved, makes a wager, then decides he wants to stack the deck with players to ensure that they win the big game. So he sends Smithers on a 24-hour scouting expedition to scour the leagues of the most successful players, and comes back with guys like Ken Griffey Jr. and Jose Canseco. Uh, it it's just like I said, I appreciate it and find it funnier each time I watch it, and definitely it's creeping up there for a top 5 episode of The Simpsons for me. So before we get to our roundtable questions, Bryce, can you let our listeners know what is coming up on our next episode, coming out on Friday, September 23rd?
Caroline, it's been a while, so I think it's time for us to crack open another pop culture time capsule. On our next episode, we're going to take you back 35 years and chat about the peak awesomeness of the year 1987. Join us as we look back at the best books, movies, music, and events happening that year. Caroline, I'm excited. I can always talk about the 80s, and I was looking at a list of movies the other night. One of my personal favorites, RoboCop, came out that year, so I'll probably be bringing that one up.
It will be our first time capsule from the 80s, so I think that'll be exciting. Lots to talk about for sure. First roundtable question. If you could only have one stadium treat to eat at a ball game, what would it be, Katie?
Oh, hot dog. 100%. There, people judge hot dogs, but it will always be culturally appropriate to eat a hot dog at a baseball stadium. 100% hot dog.
Eating hot dogs outside
Yeah.
makes them better.
Yeah.
It should be mandatory, first of all, to eat a hot dog at a game. Like after you get your ticket torn or scanned or whatever, they should just hand you a hot dog because that's just, it's part of the experience. So I actually, hot dog is my answer as well, but I just want everybody to know. So I did a little bit of research on this. I love looking at lists of like the best food at MLB ballparks. So this one came across my feed, and it is called, and this you can get this at Detroit Tigers home games. It's called the Coney Dog Egg Roll. It's at Comerica Park. It's a chili dog that instead of a bun is deep fried in an egg roll and drizzled with mustard and onions. So do a search for it, and you will absolutely want to try a Coney Dog Egg Roll. So might be planning my trip to Detroit. Caroline, how about you?
Yeah, my answer, of course, is hot dogs. But I wanted to give an honorable mention to something I don't know if they even still sell anymore. But when I went to this game, I was able to get what I think was supposed to have been sold for children, but it was ice cream in a little plastic batter's helmet. And that was thoroughly enjoyable. And anything that is coming in a commemorative cup or something that isn't normally what you would serve that food in, I'm all in. I'm their target audience. They've got my money already. Okay, next pitch. Get it? Because it's sports. The next great sports series to Amazon. Who or what is the story going to be? We give away so many great ideas here on the podcast.
We do.
But here are some more. Katie?
Well, I was thinking about rec leagues because that's, what my sports has been like lately. I was thinking about the Dewey Decimators and how you will not get a better underdog story than the library slow pitch team. But then I was thinking about, I was on a curling rec league. And I just think that there's something there. And, sometimes sitcoms will take, like The Office will go and play slow pitch. And, like, they'll do it for an episode. But I think that a show that follows, like, really terrible players but like follows their story and it's got the heart of a good sports series. I think there's something to that because I don't watch these shows for good athleticism. And so I don't need that. And I think there's something about some ESSC style, whether it's slow pitch, whether it's like a curling beer league, whatever it is, I think there's something there.
Bryce, what about you?
I came up with a couple, and I don't want to give them all away because, like you say, Caroline, we've given away so many great TV and movie ideas on this podcast.
We've given away multiple ways to do a Gilligan's Island reboot.
Yeah.
Like that's just who we are.
Netflix, Disney Plus, if you're listening, just go back in the archives and contact us at podcast@epl.ca. Our ideas can be purchased. My idea, though, is based on a real life story. And actually, Netflix had a documentary episode on this. It was just like an hour long or whatever. But I think this whole story could be a whole kind of like Amazon, like 8-episode or Netflix 8-episode thing. So it's actually on the real life hockey team. They only lasted one season, called the Danbury Trashers. So they were a team in the United Hockey League, and they played during the NHL lockout year of 2004. And essentially this team was owned by like guy who was kind of shady, maybe involved in racketeering, but like he let his like high school like his teenage son run the team. And this kid like loved hockey and was actually quite good at bringing in players. But of course they played it as more of like entertainment. So they brought in like all these goons from all these leagues and everything. And they just like beat up their opponents. And the commissioner of the United Hockey League, he didn't want like the team to become a circus, which it was, and they kind of feuded with the owners, and it's a really interesting story. Look up the Danbury Trashers. I think that's like the next great sports series. Caroline?
Competitive ballroom dancing. I don't have anything to like specific historically point to a real life story, but I know that there's especially for like teens who do it. I think there's something there. Glitz, glamour, really hard work. Maybe expanding our definition of sports again, as we talked about in our sports movie episode. But yeah, competitive ballroom dancing, I think, could be an interesting arena for a, a, a mini series. Thank you so much for joining us today, Katie. I have had a blast talking about A League of Their Own and all of these fond memories of the Decimators as well. Is there anything you would like to let our listeners know about?
Yes. Well, so as we know and as we hear all the time on Overdue Finds, the library is a fun world ready to be explored. On Saturday, September 24th, come and join us for an open house. We're going to have awesome classes. You're going to have a chance to tinker with cool tech toys, play with interactive games, and so much more. Plus, our amazing staff can point you to your next best find. So you can visit our website at epl.ca/exploreepl for more information on our open house days and where you can connect with EPL.
We hope you've enjoyed today's episode. Make sure that you're subscribed to the show so that you get all of our new episodes. Please also leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. And most importantly, tell a friend about the show, maybe even your whole sports league.
Yeah, absolutely. Tell that whole, maybe it's your Quidditch team or slow pitch team, whoever. Let them know about our show. Don't forget, we'll have a link to absolutely everything that we talked about in today's show notes. And as we mentioned before, we absolutely love to hear from our listeners. You can email us at podcast@epl.ca or reach us on Twitter at epl.ca. You can also share your thoughts with us on the show on Twitter by using the hashtag EPL Overdue Finds. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.